the agenda, I would like to recommend one minor adjustment. Is this the right time to do it? Just before we approve this agenda? Under new business, I'd just like to propose a slight amendment to this agenda under new business that will put in a report from the Hearths Performing Arts Committee, give an update, and would recommend that this becomes like a standing note in these meetings, because that committee is being very active right now. So we'll keep abreast of what's going on. So any do I need to get approval of that? Just a minor minute. Can I get someone, Judy, and a seconder to have that amendment? Jamie, right? All in favor? Yay, good. So adoption of the minutes from November the 1st. It's been a while since we've met. We've had a few subcommittee meetings. Judy moves to adopt it. Somebody who was at this meeting want to second it?
Sorry, just 1 second. I'm just, I can get here.
Oh, it's at the bottom of this. The minutes are at the bottom of.
Hi, Mimi.
This. Oh, there's Mimi. Yes, good. They're at the bottom of the.
Oh, I had to look at them earlier. I just can't. Oh yeah, no, here we go. We're good.
Good. Hi, Mimi.
Yeah.
Hello.
We're just approving the minutes from November the 1st. Looking for a second. Not that I was putting Fraser on the spot. Good. All right. All those in favor? Good. Minutes. All right. Public comments, an opportunity members of public. But we don't have that here because we don't have any public. One-way street. Good. And welcome, and new people who were at the meeting. I guess the most interesting new person here is Lee Vincent, right? Yes. So, how does it work? Do you want to have someone talk about you, or are you going to talk about yourself? Then I can't say Lee Vincent, who needs no introduction.
I thought Jillian was gonna do it. No, I'm kidding. It's actually, I think it's got me on the agenda too, talking a little bit about the position as well too, so happy to do it. We're really excited to have Lee join the team. And so through a competitive process, we were really surprised to find somebody as qualified as Lee on island and keen to come work with us. So we're really lucky. So, and it's pretty remarkable because Lee's background actually, there's a passion of his is in theater, and went to school though originally for the technical side of theater and doing technical work on stages in, I think in Nanaimo was.
Yeah,
and then through that, discovered that the passion actually was on the front of the house and on the stage, and then went to Studio 58 for school theater training there. And but then, like many artists, found out how hard it is to make a living as an artist in theater in a big city like Vancouver. And so found himself working facility management and worked extensively with Coast Hotels and most recently with the Coast Harbor Hotel downtown Vancouver. And after many years of commuting back and forth, I think you were on the early ferry, like the
yeah, post-COVID I was on the 520.
520 ferry. Yeah. And with a young family who's very engaged in athletics, was looking for alternatives that could perhaps I think fortuitous timing that we were then looking for somebody with those skills and qualifications. And so we're very excited to have Lee join us, and just in time too, as we're trying to wrap this project up and get it to the operational stage. Get away from the construction side of things. And so, so unless anybody wanted to add or ask anything, I was going to talk a little bit too about the role as it's envisioned so far.
I just like to say that I am very excited to be here and to be part of this program. I think it's a huge opportunity for us, and in my times walking through the building, it's so exciting to have something that we just don't have yet. and to see it coming to life is very exciting. So I'm really excited to be a part of it. And honored, I guess.
Second round of applause.
Oh, maybe we should stand. That never happens. You know,
For the most part, I've met most everyone, maybe not me.
I'm Mimi.
Hi.
Hello.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Welcome.
Thank you.
And I love what you said. I feel the same way.
Yes,
You
thank
know, I was asking myself, ask myself every time before the meetings, and when I think about what we're doing, why am I here? What am I doing? That's the answer I get every time.
Thank you.
I have just one question, a quick one. Is Lee now actually a member of the Joint Management Committee, or is he like staff, like you are, Leah?
Yeah.
So he's not a voting
Not a
member of
voting
the
member.
committee?
No.
Oh, interesting.
He's an ex officio member.
Ex officio member, got it.
So he is a member, but no voting.
Got
Not part of-
Whereas Liam's just an interloper.
An interloper.
I'm not even on the list.
He's a vagabond, is he?
Yeah.
We want you at every meeting.
No,
so
no,
matter-
There are a few committees that I like to attend as much as possible. So unfortunately, I can't attend.
There
all the
are
committees.
there a few committees you like to attend as much as possible? A few committees.
No, a few.
There are
A few. The
maybe
important
few
ones. It comes to the
I'd
important
like to
ones.
attend, that I'm not a member on, but that
Yeah.
I'd like to attend as much as
Gotcha.
possible. But there are far too many committees for me to attend them all.
I understand that. Very good. Sorry, just wanted to know when I was counting votes.
So I wanted to just talk a little bit about the role and first and foremost, it's because we're talking about a brand new facility, it's a brand new role, it's something that's going to evolve and develop over time as we learn how to operate in that space and how to coordinate and collaborate with all of the other stakeholders that are going to be using the space, because it is first and foremost a community space, and so it's for the community. And so that's something that we embedded in the hiring process and in discussions with Lee from the beginning, is that this will be an evolving position. But in the beginning, the primary focus is on the facility itself, and this is a much more complicated facility than anything we have ongoing. And so it's requires somebody with that level of expertise on how to run a facility with that level of sophisticated systems and that level of access to the public with that need for a high degree of safety and accessibility. So it's not going to be like here where I can go downstairs and figure out how to get the furnace working. At the new place, I'm probably not going to be able to figure out how to get the furnace working. Here I can kind of figure it out. So we really need somebody like Lee who has that facilities experience to be able to ensure that when we take possession and ownership of the facility, that we're able to operate it in the way that it needs to be. And with the help from this committee to build up the necessary policies and procedures to ensure that the facilities operated properly and maintained properly. This is going to be an incredible asset, a very expensive asset for the community, and so we want to make sure we take care of it well. And so in the beginning, that's going to occupy the majority of Lee's time, is just ensuring that we have what's needed to operate the facility. And that means like opening the doors in the morning, making sure it's ready and safe for the use of the public, and then ensuring that it's closed down and secure at night. And it's going to be open pretty much 7 days a week, maybe not 365, but a lot. So that's going to take a lot of effort on our part, on Lee's part. And then another part of the role is to do that collaboration and coordination with other stakeholders that are seeking to use the facility for what it's intended for. And we can expect that role to grow over time. But what we don't know is whether or not Lee, who's just one person, is going to be able to manage both of those things. But rather than staffing up initially with both those two positions, we felt it more prudent to start with the facility manager, who is an absolute necessity. And then as we begin to get an understanding and feel for the demand of the space and the demands on Lee's time about coordinating and collaborating with stakeholders and use of the space, then we'll have to make a management decision around, okay, do we need to get additional help in here, or how are we gonna continue to manage that? So that's at a sort of 30,000 foot level. Happy to take any questions or comments people might have.
So I'm actually just kind of curious, so the contractor's teaching you how to work everything essentially right now?
Not yet.
Not yet, but eventually, yeah.
Working through, okay. And that'll go the same with the AV?
Yeah.
So what we're hopeful for, and we've already begun discussions with the builder about, is what does the handover actually look like? And what does the manual package look like? We don't want just like, oh, here's a stack of papers, there you go. We want it ideally digital, and paper copy, and well organized so that it's, because there's a lot of systems in the facility, and then talking about like the AV element too is a huge component. And we don't, at least I don't expect Lee to know how to run all elements of the AV, because that in and of itself is quite a complex system. Or it's millions of dollars of equipment in that room. And there's other equipment in other rooms as well. But we, as part of Lee's role and this committee's role, is we'll be looking for that level of expertise in the community that we can hire and to bring in for necessary productions and things like that. And so at some point, this committee will probably be looking at like, just how do we want to do that? Do we want to do that through like our request for qualifications and get a roster of pre-qualified consultants or professionals that we can then draw on, and or there's other methods too, so.
Any other questions for Lee? Yeah.
Would that also be a pool of people that would, the people that you just mentioned that would be trained, that are locals, that would also be trained with the AV materials? Would they also be part of the events, or part of the possibility of the roster or the calendar of events, right? That they could do both. They would be helping possibly with the building and also supporting with events as well?
Yeah, very much so. So one idea that I know Kim and I talked about, I can't remember what we talked about more broadly, but was this idea whereby it's, if you're hosting an event, we need to understand, okay, what level of AV access do you need or require? And then we may say in the contract that you have to hire one of these pre-qualified people from this list. Again, I mean, maybe we can get to the place where you're bringing your own person, but I'm not sure how we would vet that. Because the risk is having people using the equipment that aren't qualified or know how to use the equipment, and it gets damaged.
I'm just going to say that that's probably a discussion of the management model. Let's not get the cart ahead of the horse.
Right.
Thank you. We're not there. So you're asking questions about things that we're here to discuss over the next several meetings.
Yes.
So,
Thank you, Kim.
yeah. Good. Anything else you want to add? Yes, Judy.
I would find it really helpful when we're all starting out in this process. So if you think of ideas that you think need to have a policy or some sort of a management guideline kind of thing, that you keep notes and jot it down and bring it so that it's, if it needs to be discussed, if it's something that you want to have included. And I mean, 3/4 of it I won't understand, but,
Right. Thank you, yeah.
part of a manual somehow.
Yeah, Jillian and I do have conversations around that.
There's lots of facilities that actually have those in
We do
place.
lots.
So you don't need to reinvent the wheel.
Absolutely.
That's my argument.
And he's already, Lee's already on the subcommittee, which is the management model subcommittee. So although he hasn't met yet,
Okay.
he doesn't know that, but
I know that.
Jillian and I decided he was on that subcommittee. We were trying to have a meeting before this meeting, just to start that process, but we'll have one afterwards. Good. Thank you, Liam and Julie.
Thank you.
Anything else to add on that? No, welcome aboard. Very exciting. We're going to then move into the subcommittee reports. That's all right, and right on time. So just to give you some context, when we first met, we basically structured 3 committees to get started. One was the mission and core values, which was to begin to develop a document that was a housing document for the facility. And then the other one was principles, rate structures, and categories. And this was a way to start looking at the finances, to break things down about what the rates would be and how that whole element would work, which would help figuring out a lot of the finance, like costs and revenue generation for the space. And then the third committee we struck was a management model committee, was basically figuring out what the management model would look like. And so those are ongoing committees to give a report. And the other thing we added to the agenda, which we just added, was the Hearths, which is a partner here at this committee. They've struck 3 years ago, they struck a performing arts committee specifically about this. And so that's another report from another committee that's working on figuring out aspects of the community center. So hopefully that gives you some bit of a context. So I'm going to ask Judy to give us an update on where we are at the missions and core values.
Okay, so page 8 of the agenda is the summary of the work that we did. So we had the last meeting was November the 1st, and then we did a workshop on the 22nd of November and hashed out a lot of this material. Steph sent around a copy that had all sorts of yellow highlighting and bits and pieces and strikeouts and everything. So then I boiled that down to this, page 8. And we haven't had a chance to look at this since the November 22nd. And I'm hoping that this is something that we can agree on. Kim and I talked earlier in terms of, Steph and I talked earlier about whether or not this should go to the council for approval and as one piece, or somehow we just hopefully finish it off tonight and accumulate it into a pile that goes to the council. We'll have to figure out whether or not council should have little bites or big bites. And,
right.
But tonight it would be nice if we could polish this off. So basically all but about the 5th or 6th the second to last paragraph, governance, communication, engagement, and relevance. I put draft in there. I don't really remember the original, but I think that this is something that I have switched up from and edited from the original. So this is maybe the one that we have to work the most on, but we need to go through all of it to make sure that this is something that we want to present to council and hope for council's approval in terms of what's the vision for this building and what are the core values that we want to have guide all of the activities in the building. So it's a motherhood and apple pie overview of how we want to express to the community what this building is about.
Right. Has everyone had a chance to read this version that we've got here in the minutes? I know we worked on it, so it's
There's going to be questions at the end. So.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, it's good, because then if we all kind of know it, then we don't have to sort of go through it. I think, thank you, Judy. I just want to reiterate that the purpose of this document is to be a guiding principle for a lot of future decision-making with the space. So it does have a bit of weight as a document. So I would say my first question is there anybody who sees something that's missing from it right now, right? And starting point.
The only glory I can take is just that introduction. We all worked on this.
Yeah, no, exactly. But it just is, we've all now having a set of eyes on it.
Glory and
Is there
responsibility.
anybody who can think, like, just go, wait a second, something's missing from this? Yeah, Liam?
I just says, I wonder about equity. And so when I think about equity, I think about accessibility to the facility. So I see accessibility as a core value, but it's not how I would think of accessibility to be a little more inclusive than that definition.
Right, we should include being accessibility and equity, like as a,
Yeah, so that like is it accessible for a diverse set of groups in the community?
Yeah.
Or that could come under an equity value in and of itself.
it's interesting that you bring that up because I remember we had some discussion around that very thing because the equity used to be in that
Right.
line item and it was a separate line item. Then it got included with accessibility. And then I think it got edited out as a word, right? But that was, Judy, do you remember that discussion we had around that? Because
No, but I think if you read both diversity and inclusivity and accessibility, those two paragraphs, does that not to serve the diverse interests of our island community and physical, financial, or otherwise? I know that we were thinking about it. And
yeah, we did. We had it in and out.
How to, and the whole thing with equity was how that's expanding in terms of.
Well, I guess like diversity and equity are two different things.
Yeah.
And so you can have a diverse population that may not have equitable access.
Right.
So
I think that's why we used the word inclusivity. That was, I'm just trying to remember the discussion we had. And that's what inclusivity was replaced equity. But that was because we thought the word, I'm just trying to remember the conversation. We thought the word was a better word to cover what we were trying to capture. So are you suggesting, Liam, that we like add in equity as well as this or rework that diversity equity paragraph
Or in with accessibility.
or add it to accessibility?
yeah, I can see it as a part of accessibility. I often see accessibility and equity as intertwined.
Right.
Intertwined. Something that simply acknowledges that there will be an effort to ensure equitable access to the facility.
So if the heading says accessibility and equity and the rest stays the same, remove all barriers, be they
Right.
physical, financial, or otherwise, does that cover it enough?
And it's also referencing, we talked about this, representing the Bowen Island Municipality Accessibility Guidelines. Was because,
Yeah, I saw that. And the libraries and the harvest guidelines too.
Yeah.
And I think that's great because I think that in there we describe that equity is so like we can make something accessible by removing physical barriers and financial barriers, but it doesn't mean that it's been like that there's a level of equity
in the
terms of
access.
the use of the facility.
yeah.
And so just because we're removing some of these barriers and we're trying to be inclusive and
Right.
encourage diversity, it's,
Can you give, if it's not included, if it's not sufficient just to have the title, then how would you?
I would say something along the lines to ensure that there's equitable access to the facility across a diverse range of interests.
And my
What's the
question,
first verb on that?
Include
Include.
or ensure.
That's better.
is this written into the Bowen Island accessibility guidelines already? Because that's what we were talking about, whether it existed already. So that's why we referenced it as a thing to pull from it. And so rather than reinvent the wheel that might be already written, we were trying to create an alignment
Right.
with the policies already in place with the municipality in this area. And
It's
so,
really easy to just
Yeah.
put it into words, and, is the broader reference in terms of the
right,
accessibility guidelines too. So we've repeated it with the other guidelines,
Yeah.
EDI. So if it's accessibility and equity, all the way through that, and then after community activities to ensure equitable access for,
Or, William, did you finish that sentence?
all community.
I had said a diverse set of users.
the issue that's interesting around this, which we were trying to address, was that focusing on people who are like how we define the community of Bowen Island. right? Because it was, I'm trying to remember the conversation that we had around this, Judy. Because it was about the people who live on Bowen versus, let's say, tourists who come and visit. So this is where, like, just when you talk about accessibility or equitable accessibility, what is the range that you put around? Like, for example, in North Vancouver, we talk about equitable accessibility for residents of the North Shore, even though people can come from all over to attend performances there. Because we're funded by the city of North Vancouver, our focus in equitable access are residents of the North Shore.
And that's exactly what I
Right.
envision too here, is that the community of Bowen Island has equitable access
Right.
to the facility.
So it's referred to as the community of Bowen Island? Is that what, I'm just looking for the word.
Yeah.
Like, where's your pot?
Yeah, and maybe the reference, because I look at the Bowen Island EDI policy, and equity is defined by 4 sub definitions of procedural equity, distributional equity, structural equity, and transgenerational equity. So it in and of itself gets complicated.
Right.
So maybe pointing to the other policies is.
Do we, instead of saying C, can we say are in line with? I'm trying to find it, just instead of just referencing it, just, can we strengthen that by?
And where I'm going and what I'm sort of coming from this is I just want to ensure that going forward in 10 years from now, that we haven't found ourselves in a position where there's a dominance over the access to the facility by certain groups. And that it's ingrained and it's like, and I don't think this group would ever allow that to happen, but it's having it embedded in the core values to me, it feels like.
It is, and that's what their core values are for, so someone can point to them and say, hey,
Yeah.
this is a core value for one of the art places.
So we like user groups more than users?
Well, you need to define the Bowen Island community with that, because that's not.
Steph, can you enlarge that?
Yes.
Yeah, that's not strong enough. You just call them a user group because some people may not be a user group yet and they want to form a user group. So you're looking at defining, is it called the community? How do you refer to it at the municipality level? Residents of Bowen
Or just say
Island, community of Bowen Island?
for the entire community.
Entire community of Bowen Island.
Yeah.
Right, that would be good. Okay. So it'd be a facility for the entire community of Bowen Island.
Okay. For
The
the,
entire community, yeah. Right. But I just changed it to in line with the BIM and Hardin Library accessibility guidelines, meaning that it's not just seeing them, but it's meant to be in line with them. Okay. Any other notes on this document? Yes, Gail?
I think the thing that's going to be most frequently read is the opening paragraph. And I love everything from the words, it is economically, socially, and environmentally sustainable facility, blah, 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 all the way to the end. The thing that I take issue with is the first 2 lines. I find it so dense. The number of ands, and ands. I can't get the feeling of the meaning through that. And so I love everything that's in there, but wonder about the idea of just breaking it up a little bit so that you can read it without your mind being kind of twisted through the density. And I mean something like the Bowen Island Community Center is the heart of the community. Period. It's a place where islanders can gather and share, period. It's a place where islanders can participate in activities and events that build healthy and resilient community.
She's a fan of Robertson Davies.
like your daughter's in New York or something.
Yeah, I know.
Robertson Davies,
I
the plain language, short sentence.
Not overly short, maybe one of them was too many breaks. But there's a way that I want to be able to, anybody to read this, like someone with a learning disability and read it somebody who is 17. Do you know, like I can hardly track the sentence because of how many twists and turns, and I'm a pretty good reader. I'm not an extraordinarily good reader.
Judy, how do you feel about that?
This was a discussion in terms of how, we, at a couple of meetings, we decided that the vision of the MOU was the one that we wanted to reference back, and I think this is a cut and paste from that.
That's a cut and paste from the MOU.
So I don't think that anything would matter in terms of chopping it up so that it's easier. So,
Yeah, there's nothing that I'm really proposing we take out. There's no
Yeah.
content that I just
Give a
disagree
nod to
with.
Roberts and Davies.
Yeah,
I understand.
you're right.
Plain
so
stuff.
if anybody,
I'm a fan.
I think if anybody were to come back and say, I thought we were gonna just quote from and cut and paste from the MOU, that we can say,
I'm
we just
happy
wanted to
MOU.
make it so that it's easier to.
Just jazzed it up.
Yeah.
Do we like we?
Where we, yes.
Period after community, and then it's a place where islanders can gather, share, and participate in activities and events.
I've got, it's period after community, it's a place where islanders can gather and share, period. It's a place where we can participate in activities and events that build and celebrate a healthy and resilient community.
Okay.
Period. Good. Yeah, 3 sentences. 1, 2, 3,
Kind of builds up.
3 sentences.
I'm open to anything.
Yeah,
It doesn't
no,
have
it's
to be
good.
broken
We're adding
up as
it on.
one. But I'm just kind of, we're open.
But I feel like we is a bit weak, but
Okay.
It's inclusive.
And by the way, in the MOU, that sentence is in there, but this is kind of this is sort of like language for people who would sit on a committee. And I'm loving the idea that the language of it could be in a program.
Right.
When you sit down to participate in an event and be like, yes, I love this center.
Kim referred it to me in terms of, as if I'm leading this
Yeah.
debate, but it's all of us. So,
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So I'm
Good.
not
So
like,
amended as Stefan's done it. Are we looking at it up
yeah,
there?
and I've got them in yellow just in case you
Right.
change your minds and what happened.
Good. Good. And I don't, any other comments on what we've got right now
For the whole document.
for the whole document?
I just want to
Yeah.
flag that everything in this document was agreed on tight by the workshop participants,
Yeah.
including poor Gail, who was not on that subcommittee, except for this bit that Judy has
draft.
added. So
This is the
as much
governance,
as we should probably
communication,
take a look at it.
engagement, and relevance. So you want to take a
So we're
look at that.
fine tuning anything, but this, we have to make sure that this is what we want to say.
Do you want to take us through this, Judy?
Okay, so BIM Council will decide on all policies regarding the management of the facility, and such policies will be recommended to them, subsequently supervised by a community-based joint management committee. Ta-da!
Ta-da.
Working with our project partners on that JMC, we will be actively engaged in intra and extra communications and engagement with partners, contractors, lessees, and our respective audiences in our approach to planning strategic directions and program development so as to serve and maintain relevancy to the community. It needs work.
Yeah, it's a little focused in on getting it open. And this document is actually a long-term one, but it's a great start because it kind of addresses where we are right now.
First and foremost, everybody has to understand that it's a management, that council and the budget for the municipality is basically what's in control,
Right.
right? And then we're gonna work as hard as we can to be engaging with everybody.
Right. And
Subject to the, some of the details of the MOU, but.
the interesting thing, part of this might be, Liam, you can maybe want to address this, is in the future, let's say we jump ahead 40 years or 30 years, often with these facilities, there are new capital initiatives that come up in relationship to the project, right? It's either things that have to be upgraded, fixed, or additions added on. And so you end up coming back to the place where you are right now, where you're initiating a capital a project and developing it. And so a clause like this is relevant in that way. And I'm just wanting to figure out how you would wordsmith it a bit so that it reflects that it's ongoing. Do you know what I mean? It's like you would, this whole thing could cycle again if they decided to do an addition onto the place, or look at it, you would go back to what the building was, and then you figure out because of these values, this is the way this decision would get made, and this paragraph would indicate how that would work.
I think that comes into play in the terms of reference, right? Because this is about operations, not capital.
Right,
If we're talking, like, I have ideas for expansion already, but.
yeah.
And,
You're not getting a pool.
But I think what happens with these core values, Liam, is buildings are enablers of activities. So it's meant to be that the activity is the engine for what gets done, not the other way around. Because capital projects are because the building's activities. And so this is about the management of the activity that would lead to the decisions to decide that there would be need to be other things built, right? At least that's the way I'm reading it, because it's kind of how you get here. So is there any wordsmithing tweaks that are needed to either make it clearer, stronger,
Jillian.
or more inclusive? Did Jillian say something? Yes, oh, go ahead, speak, Jillian.
I think, to me, I wonder when I read that, what is the value that we're trying to communicate in that entire paragraph? Because it does feel much more in the governance and how we're structuring it. So that's why I'm wondering if we can read it and just sort of see what emerges as the value within that, and we can expand on what that value is.
That's
Is
a
it
very
about
good point.
engagement?
It's like a hierarchy
Yeah.
in some ways. So BIM council is the one that decides on the policy, and that's gonna be recommended to them, and once it's accepted, it's gonna be supervised by the joint management committee. And then that committee is working with project partners. The joint management committee itself has got joint partners, and that committee and those partners are gonna communicate as much as possible with other partners, contractors, lessees, and respective audiences. So sort of all-inclusive, trying to figure out what all the, if I can use the broader term, audience.
I think what you're asking, Jillian, is really good. Is it a collaborative model? Like you said, it is about hierarchy, so it is about how decision-making happens. And so what is the spirit of this model? Right? Is it consultative? Is it collaborative? Is it consensus? Like I think you've identified what's missing from the paragraph is the spirit in which the model is to work, right? Because you can have somebody in charge, but the spirit of the committee is that this is a collaborative process, this is a consultative process. What kind of a process is this?
And remembering that these are core values of the center, not of the committee.
No, it's of how the
Yeah.
center is managed, which is what the center is,
Okay.
right?
Following on what Gail said in terms of chopping it up and making it shorter sentences, BIM council will decide on all policies regarding management of the facility, period. Such policies will be recommended to them and subsequently supervised by a community-based.
Just changed will, Judy, because it's not the future, it'll be the present.
Okay. By a community-based joint management committee, working collaboratively with project partners on that joint management committee. And this is where we get in, it's no longer collaborative when we're working with necessarily contractors, lessees, and respective audiences. We're enforcing the policies, right?
Right, and so is this the place?
So we're gonna try and communicate and engage with them
Right,
in our approach to planning, strategic directions, and program development.
right.
We aim to serve and maintain relevancy in the community, something?
Is this about inclusivity, relevancy?
We've kind of covered that. I think what Judy's trying to, this is a kind of a guide, a value for the governments.
What is the value?
Well, that's what it is. We said collaborative, I've said is what you're putting it in there. And you're also saying who's collaborating and then who's being engaged, right? I'm just trying to.
Does that help?
I'm messing it up.
Yeah, she's just
trying to-
wordsmithing, which is good.
It just feels so different from the rest of the document, this section. It feels like the others are values and this is a little bit more about how we're going to ensure we implement and maintain those values.
And I agree. I think what's missing from it is the value. Like it's describing it, but what is the value? Like, is it, I will go back, is it a collaborative one? Is it a consultative one? Is it a hierarchical one? What's the because we're in the values document and someone's gonna wanna be able to look at this and point to it. I keep looking at you over here, but I should.
Here, she's right here.
Oh, there she is.
I put her here for you.
So we're talking about a mixed model.
Yeah.
Right? It is hierarchical. It is also collaborative. and
That's right.
It's going to be enforcement. Or
And I think maybe, do we want to divide it into three then? So who's in charge, who's collaborating? And the question is, do we need it about the people who are just being told to follow? Like, or do they need to be included in this? Right? Like, is it, because I'm actually trying to get my brain around it, right?
So Jillian, are you saying that maybe this isn't part of core values, that this is a different heading?
That's what I'm
All
wondering.
by
I'm
itself?
wondering if all of this,
Yes.
all
Okay.
these core values are guiding other components of the policies that
Okay.
we need to develop.
Okay, so then if we have shared territory, diversity, inclusivity, accessibility and equity, humanism and safety as core values, and then a separate heading for governance, communications, engagement and relevance, equal to vision, core values and governance.
Good.
Does that work?
Could engagement and relevance be a core value, like promising that we're gonna talk to everybody how we wanna use this building going forward? Like, is that the core value of this? Like, obviously, we have the council and the budget that tells us exactly what we have to do. But our value, our promise is to go out to our community partners who use this building and say, what do we need to do next?
Does that work for Jillian?
Yes.
But,
Yeah.
yeah, I think it's because then that becomes a value, because what we're doing is then council is committing to that value in decision-making. Right? I mean, you are stating that they're the ultimate ones who make the decision, but they're committing to the value of either consensus or collaboration, or both. It's like, it is how it works, right? And you have to be aware that people's feet will be held to the fire in 50 years. They can't work outside these values. They can be revisited, but that's the purpose. That's why they're value statements. So how is any proposals on how to wordsmith this to capture
Well,
it?
if we just take out governance and communications, there's very little in there about communication. So that could go as out of the heading, but if we took out and just left it as engagement and relevance, that might work.
Take out the first sentence.
And then take out,
Jillian's hand is up.
Yeah.
you just speak, Jillian.
What if the component that's talking about how the committee will do it and with council has to approve it, what if that is at the very bottom of all of it under the safety? So that this section here is just about engagement and relevance, but then sorry, I'm not speaking very well, but the rest of it is all of the values that we've just listed will all be maintained by council and the committee following these practices. See what I mean? Like the statement about how the committee works and the council approves it is relevant to everything on this document. So it could just be at the end of all of it.
Down there? Not those two sentences?
Well, she's talking about moving the whole
Oh, the whole thing?
thing.
So
down.
you've got vision, you've got core values, and you've got governance.
Right. So governance becomes another heading.
Well, if governance is part of this document, that's
Yeah.
what I'm still not entirely understanding, but what I'm saying, and just not in a very articulate way, is that those governance statements apply to all of it, not just that one bullet.
Governance is in terms of requirements, right? Like that's what decides how we're governed. It's already not.
But it's, because it's a value-based statement, it's okay to have governance in a value. Like, what is the value that you're putting on the way you're gonna operate, right? Because we've spoken about how we're gonna treat people on the outside, people coming into it, what the building is for. It's not a bad idea to have one bullet point about how you're gonna govern yourself too, right? That's being held accountable.
But isn't that what the core values are?
They are, because, we make sure that they're going to do that. But what this paragraph, and I agree with Judy about why it's in there, is it does clarify how decision-making is done.
Which is in the terms of reference that it's a vote.
Yeah, it is, but it doesn't have a value. The terms of reference just say how it's going to happen. It doesn't put any value on it. So I agree with Jillian. It's not a bad thing to have in there. Like, we're going to be nice to each other. You're going to be respectful. You're going to arrive at decisions in this way and not just.
We can't say things like consensus because that's not how it is.
Exactly. But that's why I'm trying to find the right word of what is the value that you bring to that.
I feel like that's another subcommittee meeting.
Yeah, we're not going to get it here.
Yeah, I was gonna say, to be the bad guy, we're 10 minutes late in terms of on what we're doing with the agenda, so.
So we're not going to solve it here?
I don't think we're gonna get it all done.
Okay.
In the interest of making sure everybody else gets.
Judy, do you mind continuing to tackle it now that you've heard this discussion and come back with something at the next meeting? We're not in a time sensitive on this. I mean, the process is to get it approved, then take it to council to look at.
Yeah, it just means that for your recommendation for today, presented and amended by the January 16th meeting, we'll have to change that.
Yeah. We don't have to do one. Just put an action item I don't know that Judy needs to be alone in this, though. I think she needs some support.
So to be continued, we'll put it as an action item.
Yeah, okay, perfect. Thank you. Thanks, Judy, for this. But everything else, I think we're good on. Yeah.
And Chair, could I ask, there was an earlier question at some point about whether pieces were brought to council in bite-sized chunks or package, and I think package is a better approach.
Okay.
And I would defer to Councillor Gaddy's thoughts on that too, but I think
Well, if we got into this kind of wordsmithing at council, then.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I would think that council would prefer to have a package.
Gotcha.
And it can all be addressed.
And keep everything in context, and then I think it would be not in our favor to have this, background and the introduction and the all the people involved in the process 6 different times as we come up with different things. So.
Right, so that means this has to be ready when everything else is ready, so you've got time. Brilliant, thanks, you've got time. Good. Good, I don't think we need a motion because we're still working on it. Great, thank you very much. So I'm gonna move now to the principles, rate structures and categories. So this is an update coming from Fraser.
So I think, well, it's not just me for this, but I think one of the things we talked about last time was that this is gonna be something that's gonna come a little bit later because we still have so much ground work to do before figuring out what rates are gonna be. But it also comes into what one of the action items was for myself and Jamie and Gail coming up with lists of who wants to do what when. Is this who actually wants to use this space and how many times a year could somebody be holding an event? And so we've come up with a bit of a schedule with not everybody that could conceivably do this, but as we've got it right now, 12 user groups on the island that have expressed interest in using mostly the large multi-purpose room. And so, for example, we spoke to Sherry Ulrich and her Trust Me series concerts, for example, and she could see herself, depending on what rates could be, doing 10 to 12 shows a year, one night show kind of things, bringing people in. She currently does all of that up at Tiernanog and did express, concern that some places on the island, such as Tiernanog and whatnot, could lose some revenue to us. So how do we make sure everybody stays happy and healthy financially as well too? So that's something we've got to think about. But 10 to 12 shows a year for just her could be pretty cool. we've spoke to a number of bands, straight up Seven Hills, the Snow Cove Blues Band. They've all expressed interest in doing, you know, anywhere from 1 show to up to 4 shows. Night Market, Sarah Haxby, that's an option as well too. So it's not just arts that we've reached out. There's still more groups to go through. Theater on the Owl, of which I'm involved, could do up to 4 things a year. They could be one-off one nights. They could be 2 or 3 nights. Still obviously in the works of that. But as I see it right now, it could be up to 47 events per year doing this, which is pretty cool. And that gives a ton of space as well too for other user groups that we don't know about that are out there to do things. So yeah, it's still a work in progress. Jamie, do you want to add anything to that as well too? And we're continuing to do that process as we go.
We haven't added the sort of, I think it was Jillian that mentioned it about Canada Day, events like that.
Yeah.
Indigenous First Peoples Day, you know, we haven't added those to the calendar yet.
Sure. I mean, and there's quite a fair bit to go. Judy, you had a hand up.
I'm just thinking that we've enjoyed the sort of a captive audience with respect to theater stuff. But I think that there's a whole other audience in terms of actual, you know, what people budget for entertainment and, you know, the kinds of things that they want and need for their family. So if you could get your heads together and try to think of a wider list, you know, all sorts of, you know, what goes on at the Children's Festival and the Writers' Festival and
I think what the scope of this committee though is it's a little bit of creep outside the mandate a bit right now. For us to be able to determine rates, what we need to know now is who currently is using space for performance and what they're paying.
Yeah.
That's the list we need right now. Because that'll help determine what the market is. And then the other stuff which could happen is great, but what we need in order to be able to set rates is to figure out like what the market is out there currently, and then also what costs are. And it's not so much when it is, but it's a number. So the 47 number is a good place to start because that actually creates a budget. Because you go like X amount of rentals, 47 times what that is, starts to begin to create the budget so that we can start playing, so that the municipality can start playing with numbers and go like, this is what the revenue is, and these are the costs associated with using it, labor costs, right?
I also think that if we can expand, you know, and have an understanding of some of the things that can come from off-island, that can supplement, right? So that both the people that are organizing events that are all on island are, you know, not wanting to be solely responsible.
Yeah, but I think Sherry is that, because she's producing people, she's a producer.
But there's all of the, you know, when Mara was here and she was bringing acts over from the Fringe Festival, when, you know, there's all sorts of potential in terms of, you know, the person that's going to be involved with booking acts is going to want to try and figure out part of the budget in terms of bringing in.
So who's that person who's doing the bookings? So who's the producer here? Who's our promoter?
Yeah.
Who is it?
Well, we get to that in the management model.
That's
so
you.
question as well too.
But that's what I want to make it clear, right? Is the municipality getting in the business of promoting? What I'm understanding is that it'll be somebody from the community. It'll be the Hearth or Sherry or somebody will step forward. So just before we I just want to make sure we don't get the cart in front of the horse. The first step is to try and figure out some numbers and some user nights that we can plug into to see what scope we're talking about. Like a scope of activity, I call it, right? So if you have a facility and you're doing 47 out of 365 nights, that determines the scope of activity, which is very helpful.
I should say 47 events could be one of those could be one-offs, one of those could be
What we need
nights.
are user nights.
Exactly. So again, it's some of these are one-off shows that people want to do. Some of these are, for example, us in Theater on the Isle would love to have a reoccurring October show, just like what we did up in Tier.
Maybe I'm gonna try and help guide you guys a bit.
Well, you're on the subcommittee.
I'm on the subcommittee. So basically, before we get into when it is, and what it is.
Yeah.
The first thing we need is a number of user nights.
Yeah, and that's what we're working on. So
Yeah.
again, the bottom line is we're not there. We still
Yeah.
have lots of digging still to do, but it's in progress. We also know what the current groups, or a number of them, are paying right now for what they're doing.
Great.
And it's been expressed to
Sorry, we do
me
know
for.
we do know or don't know?
We do know.
do know.
Okay.
Yeah. And it's been expressed that if prices are too high, of course, they'll
They
go
won't use
elsewhere,
it.
that's natural. But there's also a lot of optimism and a lot of excitement for going forward with these groups to do these shows there. So I think the bottom line for today is that there is a demand there for, I think, a fair amount of stuff.
Well, we have a preliminary draft budget that we've drawn up as part of the business case, which is where we can look towards like filling that hole, right? So we take whether that 47 events translates to 100 user nights. Okay, could we expect to?
That's where we
fill that
want to get
hole?
to.
What do we then? Oh, well, we couldn't charge enough to fill that hole without driving people away. And that's a decision that we're gonna have to come to terms with as a community, and council will ultimately be weighing in on that. And because there most certainly it may be that some of this is subsidized.
Right.
Yeah.
So what I think we
Where's
need
that
to,
budget?
what we need to do now is we're at the information gathering stage, not the decision-making
Yeah.
stage. So what we need to do is we need to consolidate this information so we understand we're talking about apples to apples and oranges to oranges, because mistakes happen when you start mixing this up. And we also need to know what is currently happening, already budgeted for by groups and organizations on the island, and stuff that is planned for and may happen in the future, but will require some risk-taking from someone who's doing it. And so once we have all that information, it'll be a lot easier to discuss rates and, as Liam suggested, knowing where the gaps are between what the community can do already and what the costs are. Yes, Judy?
In terms of Michael Nankin's idea about setting up a film club, and that was not knowing, being able to talk to him in terms of what equipment would be in there. So have you got, Lee, have you got enough of a handle on that in terms of if Michael were to talk to you about what he would need for setting up a regular film club, that you could tell him what's
Yeah, I mean, we know
in
what,
order?
we know the spec on the projector, we know the spec on the legs and everything like that. We can work with that. It's whether or not it's a high enough
I
resolution
think
projector.
from what I recall, there was, a request to increase the caliber of the projector, which is not realistic or viable in our current situation.
The other thing that came up recently was Theatre on the Isle has in their storage locker proscenium drapes that came out of possibly Presentation House, I'm not sure. So we were wondering whether or not that is something that is going to be of any use, or whether we should find somebody else that wants it.
Jillian, but I believe that the drapes and the legs and everything like that are part of contract.
They're definitely within scope
Yeah,
of the
it's
project.
within scope and it's.
Also, the issue will be they'll be too short because of the height of the building. I just want to keep focused on this, the rates and
Yep, sorry.
the rates thing. It's a complicated issue, right? So I want to focus a bit more on process right now. So we need to set some goals for ourselves, some actions. So the first thing is gathering the information and putting it in one document that is going to capture simple things like what people are paying already and the number of user nights they have. And if we can get that into a consolidated document rather quickly, then we'll be able to start to compare apples to apples and start making decisions that will be able to help the people in the community understand. Because until they start hearing numbers, there's going to be a reluctance in decision-making, but numbers can't be given until we understand what our costs are. And costs are related to labor, right? And labor is determined by amount of activity. And so I still wrestle with all of this because I don't know if I'm looking at something that's part-time, spread out through the year, or something that's a bit more solid, which is like a full-time contract and how much is involved in it. And so that document, I just guard against going into the weeds on our first draft, because we'll have a chance to have a much fuller calendar and really expand and look at all these other things. But we need some guidelines around this decision-making. So can I,
Well, we as a committee need to meet.
Yeah.
And as it stands right now, it's yourself, myself, and Kristen on
right,
the
and
committee.
Mimi, I think we dragged Mimi on.
I've only got the
Did you
three
get
of
rid
you,
of-
but if you wanna put Mimi on there to get.
I just have the three. I was
You
gonna
can
say
be
we need
crack a whip.
we need more legs for sure
Yes,
with that.
exactly.
Okay,
And it would be great, I would say, if somebody from the Hearth could be
If someone-
involved in that as well too.
I have a question about, I don't think I'm actually on that committee. I think I'm on the model, I'm still a.
Management model committee,
Management
yes.
model committee. But I do have a question about the gathering of that information. So for instance, the Hearth, which would probably be one of the types of organizations that would be bringing in this talent from off island, that's being alluded to by Judy. There is a process in Canada for that to happen, which is that you apply for funding from the British Columbia Arts Council for some, their touring support, whether it's out of province or in province is a different competition. And the timing of those competitions are determined, whether it's national or provincial, sets up different timeline differences in how you apply for that funding. We don't know our opening date, so we don't know when we can start programming. So it's odd, like the Hearth is not actually able at this point to put numbers into that 47.
That's fine.
That's fine though.
Okay, that's my question is how far ahead would you like us to project to help with this? Just let me finish this. For this accumulation of information, we would love to be able to add into it, but our problem is that we're not in a position
I
to
understand
program
that.
successfully.
But this is what we're after here. I think what we're doing is we're mixing up timeline with costs for budgeting. So if I want to budget an event, I need to know what my venue is going to cost me to rent, right? I need that before I can do any planning. We're trying to determine rental cost, a venue, not when it's happening. We're trying to determine how it's going to happen, whether it's in 10 years, 5 years, or tomorrow. So what's the cost to the user for the activity, right? And so in order to do that, we need to start having numbers around what it costs to run the venue, right? And that's going to be determined by the amount of activity. Depending on the amount of activity that's happening, the costs get amortized over labor, right? Over whether you're hiring somebody for a week or whether you're doing it as a one-off. We just need to find a document that starts putting these numbers together so that we can come to some decision-making to help you plan an event
As a presenter,
as a presenter.
the first thing you do is get a budget.
Yeah,
So you know how much you can pay for a band.
yeah,
You know how much you need for technical support, if you need to rent equipment
Exactly.
or whatever. So, no one's gonna present until they know those numbers.
exactly. And so we're trying to figure out those numbers and figure out what the cost is and how much subsidy would be coming from the municipality to get it going, right? Sorry, yes, go ahead, Judy.
So I think that we have to switch it around. And, let's assume that we're going after middle level costs in terms of bands and, that's X budget. And that, if we're relatively certain that we can get in at that level and book some of those groups and that we can fill the house. We're not gonna go high end and risky ones. So and we don't necessarily want to fill it up with low end, marginal.
But I think we're getting this.
But if we're switching it around,
Yeah.
then you can figure out, given that we're not gonna spend any more than that, then we're going to be able to, probably get funding and do this many
As
times.
a series.
But that's a hard thing, right? I'm a bit confused because is the Bowen Island Community Center going to be a presenter? Are they going to be a presenter that takes risk and puts on events? and then charges money at them and figures out whether they can break even or make money or lose money. Because I assume that
That's
this is a
another question.
rental facility that other user groups are going to use.
Yeah.
So this committee is about figuring out what the rental cost of the space is, not how they're managing risk, right? Now, we can help someone manage risk by subsidizing those costs, right? So for us to begin to figure out where the subsidy is needed, what the full cost is, we need to kind of get a grasp on the user groups to have an idea of how much I don't want to use the word infrastructure, but how much labor, operational labor is going to be required for the model. So the first thing I heard, which is great, thank you, Fraser, if you talk about 47, we want to know how many of those are real nights in the first year and how many will grow into that. So with the hearth, it's okay to say currently next year, it's going to be 8 nights, but we're going to grow into 30. That's okay. We know that 8 is real and well.
Just give an example.
Just make Sorry, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So we have those user nights right away and we go, this is gonna mean this much. And then we're able to determine what the actual cost is, and then it'll be a discussion about it's too high. These groups need to be subsidized to prime the pump and get it going. And this is how much it'll cost to subsidize it. And also how we can figure out how to reduce those costs, right? Which is a management model. But what we don't have yet is I'm not able to grab this first starting number, if you know what I mean. Number of user nights, what kind of revenue are people paying?
And then the one-offs.
Yeah, and that's what I mean.
Big film festival wants to come in for the whole weekend.
Yeah,
Who, like, that, they could pay prime.
they can, and we'll set what that prime rate is, but we
Yeah.
want to make sure that we serve the existing user groups as a starting point. That's kind of what I'm trying to.
Yeah, and
That's our success.
what we're talking about is existing user groups.
Yeah.
Again, for the purpose of what we're at, we've got to move on, I think.
Yeah.
So I would recommend that we as the subcommittee need to meet up. And if maybe somebody from Hearth could join in on that as well too.
I think I'm on that committee,
Awesome.
yes.
Yeah, and I
What's
think I
that,
would
Jamie,
invite-
you want to be on this?
I think I am.
Yeah, you
I
are
don't have you on it, I'll
Good.
put you on
I
it.
think I originally was.
That would help.
Let's pop in.
And then may I make a suggestion that you split it into two, like the simple document with just the user nights and the fees on it, and then you can continue to work on the larger calendar. That's a great thing.
I think
but
we as
we
a
don't-
subcommittee
we don't-
can sort that out.
Yeah, sort that out. That'll be helpful. Great, thank you.
Sorry, may I speak? Jamie, I've got you on the management model subcommittee and I've got you on the values. If you want to be,
No, the mission, sorry, the mission.
Thanks, Judy.
I don't know. I can't be on all three.
okay, well, Gail, I'm going to put you there because you were actually.
Yeah, I was gonna say, why don't you-
Excellent participant of that, and I'm sorry, is it ER? Yeah,
Thank you.
and then I'll put Jamie on the principal.
Great.
So all I was trying to ascertain was if we are not ready to present in the 24-25 year, should we be projecting our numbers? That's all my question.
Yeah, and I think, yes.
Thank you.
Yeah,
That's all.
as a projection, it helps because.
Yeah,
This is all very
and
true.
it's not even being held, like, is it useful if it's 2 years from now, this is what we think? Yeah, thank
It
you.
does help. It helps just with planning and figuring out
Perfect.
how to make it work. Good. So we.
So action item is for that subcommittee to meet.
Right, and to bring for the next meeting, a document that is user nights and fees currently being used in the community as a starting point, plus the other one it's working on, but that one is a one to get.
Nights and fees, what people are paying already and number of use nights they
Yeah.
have, okay.
Perfect. I'm going to move on to the management of model subcommittee. And I know you're brand new, Gail, but I'm wondering if you, and it's Jillian who has been prepared this document for us, Jillian, right? You sat down and you had a chance to go through this. This is, maybe you want to speak to this, what this is exactly, Jillian, for, I think it's new to Gail, right?
So I got it last night.
You got it last night, but
Yeah.
Yeah.
I read it.
this document has been evolving.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So we did discuss this once at committee, and I realized that I hadn't incorporated some of the the comments and discussions that we had. So that was part of what I was doing with just cleaning it up a little bit, but also what I realized with it, it was that it was complicated and not everybody was understanding some of all of the different columns that was in it before. So the idea was just to simplify a little bit. And then really looking to actually what is going to happen in a few months when we open the doors. So that's kind of what was driving the work and this version here. This is not, looking at what is it that we could be? How do we really want to figure out other management models? This was just, let's be really practical right now and figure out what we do when we open the doors. Because we've had some discussions as a group about misunderstanding what level of involvement can be realized from BIM and the hearth and what exactly people's roles are. So we just, so I'm really grateful to have thought this out with Lee yesterday. We did some work thinking about this and recognizing that in this column where it does say facility manager, that is sometimes, custodians doing that work as well. That's not necessarily always Lee's role, but we tried to really break it down into just looking at performances in that large multi-purpose room and any other room rental in the entire space, being that.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Who are you referring to when you say admin?
Oh, that's it's a combination of some rec staff time and some finance department time. And that's something that, speaking with Kristen.
Well, there's finance and then there's, okay, but that was different. It's like the large multipurpose room, introductory room tour is either facility manager or admin.
Yes.
So is that the person behind the information counter, for instance, or?
We haven't specified.
Just throwing darts.
A little bit throwing darts. And this is a little bit also based on the other management model document that Kim had generated and shared some time ago, that was looking at the potential of, the facility manager, an administrative coordinator, and an arts, culture, and engagement coordinator. So that we tried to sort of just frame that administrative role in this, knowing that, some, as I said, sometimes finance, sometimes rec helping. So if
I just have an embarrassing question. The three color codes, what is the delineation of those for you? How do you see that? Do you know what I mean? Like gray, the orange and the blue.
Those were all just keeping things together within one category. So the top section was the facility maintenance, which is a very incomplete list, which is why I wrote that. So there's an awful lot of things that will be under the responsibility of the facility manager, but we didn't feel, for the purposes of understanding running rentals and performances within the space, that could be fleshed out more, but wasn't necessarily urgent for this document. So all of the next content, that sort of, I don't know, is that like wild salmon color?
Angry salmon.
That was all large multi-purpose room performance rental. And then the blue section was non-performance room rental, whether that was the small multi-purpose room, the large multi-purpose room, council chambers, any of the other rental spaces in the facility, because the needs were similar. So we thought this would be something that we could talk about. It's a great opportunity to hear more, like a little bit from the hearth. Like, are we not representing areas that you feel you'd be more involved? Steph, stop showing all of that stuff. That's hasn't been worked on.
That's good. No, thank you, Jillian. That was just me, because I'd seen a few of these, and just the groupings. Personally, I find the groupings quite helpful because they're activity based, right? It's like focusing in on the kind of activity that's happening.
Yeah, so trying to clean that up and make it easier to understand what we're trying to do.
So any questions, comments for Jillian on this document?
Do you have questions about the non-performance room rentals of the blue categories? You've got some hearth responsibilities there with a question mark. If these are non-performance rentals, why is the hearth responsible for scheduling communications and managing the website and ticket sales for those?
I think, that, as I said, that's why there's question marks. So wondering, because could we think of an example of a room rental that it's not actually performance, but maybe it's rehearsal or getting together of that group? Maybe it's a writers' fest workshop. I mean, I don't know.
Like the EDI workshop, so something like that, where the hearth may be interested in that space, but not performance driven. And yeah, don't ever, this is all draft, so we're not saying you are
Oh,
responsible.
yeah.
No, that's what I'm asking. Okay, but I would think that the non-performance rentals would be hearth related. I think that needs to be noted, that if it's a non-performance event on the island, are we responsible for all of them? As the scheduling,
I don't read it that way.
you don't?
So the first column is will.
Because the
CC provide this service, yes, and then a question mark for yes. So this column here says yes, first of all.
Yeah.
And then this one says yes with a question mark. So there's two different things going on.
Is there?
like we know for certain that the municipality will be using those non-performance spaces, and so we will be involved in scheduling and all that kind of stuff. And
Right.
do we anticipate the hearth to be accessible?
So if it's a non-performance like Sarah Haxby's night market.
That's a good example.
Yeah, so is that we as the hearth would be responsible for scheduling, communicating, and managing the website and ticket sale? Well, there wouldn't be any ticket sales because it's a non-performance. So I'm just trying to clarify.
Yeah, where the line is.
How much we're
Mhm.
involved.
As are we, wondering like where do you see the role of the hearth through all of that? Yeah.
Sure, but is the hearth responsible for these sort of
Questions.
No, I don't think anyone's said that yet. I think this is like this is what the management model is being developed to answer the question. And the way that I see this is based on the original layout that Kim sort of threw out to the group in this 1, 2, 3, and 4. And I see that the blue is kind of a response to the idea that 3 and 4 maybe lived under the responsibilities of the arts and cultural engagement coordinator concept that Kim threw out. And I mean, when I look at this blue, I think, wow, that would go so far beyond what the hearth could actually hold and be able to competently oversee. Whereas when it's in the red, you know, those areas from the ends down, you know, for the muni side will, Bowen Island community, the BIM staff doesn't have anything from licensing and insurance down, but that might be an area where the hearth would more naturally be able to be like, yes, this we can take on. This is where some of our strengths would lie. But once we get into the blue, I think what Jamie is saying, if it's not a hearth-based event, you could see how it would be stretching our capacity beyond what we're capable of, because it's not arts related.
Right, thank you. Judy, you had something you had to say?
I think that in terms of this, whatever the budget, you know, there's, in terms of this management model that you passed around earlier, Kim, in terms of the arts, culture, and engagement coordinator being at least a part-time position, that's not in anybody's business case at this point, so that's not budgeted. Sorry?
That's not what?
In anybody's business case or anybody's budget. So I think the bigger question is, if we all agree that there needs to be that kind of person, that kind of position, then how do we fund it, right? And if it's, if it's not gonna be, that's a bit, much bigger question that we have never talked about in years of planning all this. So very, very early on, there was, when we were doing the applications to the federal government, the budget included a part-time facility manager and a part-time programmer. So that has evolved into funding for a facility manager and us scrambling around wondering what the heck are we doing in terms of what we need and want and would find the most helpful is this programmer. And it's a very specific skill set. And it's something that we have to grapple with in terms of what are we going to do without it? How do we get it? And how do we deal with that? And then once we've got that figured out, is it going to be under the supervision of the Hearth, under the supervision of BIM, whatever, pros and cons for all the top possible models, and then what that person's going to be responsible for, and whether if it's a Hearth employee or a BIM employee, what the job description is and what they're going to be doing. So, this whole thing in terms of expectations and delivery and what the model is, we haven't had that discussion, and that's a tough one, and we have to get into it at some point.
That's very good. I thank you, Judy, for that. I think putting on the agenda the Performing Arts Committee's report might be able to give some information of at least where the Hearth is looking at that. The value of this document is actually showing where the gaps are. And so I think it's good for us to know that if there are line items where things are not going to happen or we don't have the money for it, it helps us determine how it's going to happen in the first beginning of the operations of it, right? Which is volunteerism, which we come back to about how to make it happen. Also, if there are things that need to be actually done that are part of the hard costs of it, that is going to inform the rate structures and fees discussion, right? About how these, even at a short-term level, how things can be paid for through earned revenue through rentals, because we're identifying. So there's an interconnection between the discussion of the rate rentals things that we're setting, like what we're charging for weddings and things like that, and how that directly relates to filling in the gaps in this document. I think what's important is that thank you for bringing that up, Judy, is at the management model level, before we go, this is a big problem, it's like identifying how it will work going forward, which is the question that you're bringing up, Judy. Is it a BIM responsibility? Is it a Hearth responsibility? Or if it's a volunteer responsibility, who's coordinating those volunteers? So that's kind of where we're at. I think, yes, go ahead, Jillian.
Thank you. I'm sorry. I should have said this in the very beginning, but I think I need to explain how I think we should be reading this document. So when we read what the task is and we see, will the community center provide this service? That is saying community center. It's not saying BIM, right? So the idea being, yes, this is something that the site is being offered, and then columns D, E, F, and G are all of us working together to provide that service. So I just want to make sure that it is being read in that way and not.
Right, yeah, that's good. And I think the other thing I would just add to that, Jillian, is this is a living organic document for discussion. And I really appreciated, Jillian, that you put it out there because it helps us identify gaps and then figuring out strategies. Because what you've done, and again, I ask if there's anything that's missing. From my perspective, I think it's a pretty thorough document covering all the aspects that we could think of in running a facility like that, like all the levels that had to be done. And so there is some overlap where things are mentioned twice, but I think that's a better mistake to make than having a missing line item where you go, oh my gosh, we needed that and we didn't put it there. So going forward, I think this is where Judy, you articulated where what the challenge is now figuring out how to work. I think the first question I have is this a good document to work with? Like, is this a useful tool for us? Because we get to reference it and go like, I can point to this part and figure out what needs to be done and who's going to do it. Can we agree that this is a good starting point for this discussion as a reference point? So I'd actually like to propose a motion that we adopt this as our starting point document. Do you know what I mean? To work with it, because we actually haven't officially done that. So can I entertain someone to propose a motion?
The thing that Jillian sent out also had a list of, I'm trouble getting it up on my screen, but something that needed updates that was
It had a section, it had various sections below these ones that
Right.
hadn't worked on yet. So maybe we don't adopt it immediately, maybe give people a
Okay.
little bit more time to look at it and send suggestions. Was that fair? And then we can,
Sure, I see that now. Yes, the one that was not printed, which is,
all content below not updated. And
Something like
Yes.
that will be showing.
so Jillian, you would like to go back and work on it a bit more?
well, if
It's-
it is found to be valuable to the group, I would suggest that we get together as a subcommittee and do continue this work together.
Right, but I guess I think in principle, I'd like to just have it in the minutes that we go, this is a good way of getting at this, because we've been trying to figure out how to look at this. So this is draft number
Spreadsheet.
4 I've looked at, I think. So some have gone this way, some have gone this way, and I find this one the most useful. Yeah.
Can we call it the tasks spreadsheet? Is that what it's called?
Yeah, task spreadsheet for operations, yeah.
Spreadsheet for tasks, foundational document
Yeah.
that will serve as a template moving forward.
Yeah. And entertain someone to make that as a motion to, Judy first, a seconder. Mimi, great. Is everyone in favor of using this one at this point?
Aye.
Good. Doesn't mean anything other than we're not gonna keep trying to reinvent a new one. Okay, so next steps, actions that need to be taken with this. So Jillian, you're going to go and try and figure out how to move those ones at the bottom and figure out how to incorporate them into the document. Judy?
Sorry, did you say Jillian? or somebody?
Jillian is with the subcommittee. Subcommittee will continue to look at this. There is a discussion, I think, which is good to have at a subcommittee level, which is to start talking about different ways of making this work. And I don't know, that's a pretty open thing, but there's a cost. And I think I would suggest that the subcommittee come back to this committee with recommendations on the way things could work. Liam has mentioned that the municipality may be in a position to offset some shortfalls in revenue, which could be a way of making this happen, of fulfilling some of these. Anyway, that just needs to be a continuation of the subcommittee, is to look at different, where the people are coming from that are filling some of these gaps and spaces. And also, is it something that's going to be overseen or supervised by the municipality, or overseen by Hearth, or yet another model, right? So that's the action going forward, and I think we can propose that at least a draft proposal come back to this committee the next time we meet. Having looked at this document a little bit more thoroughly. Is that everyone good on that? As a way of moving forward? Because we'll then go like,
Put me on that subcommittee.
you're not on it. I'm
It
looking
is.
at you. I'm looking at you, Judy, just going like, does that make sense or not? You're my sense person. Great, so that's the action coming out of that. And now, sorry, we want a management model. A quick update for construction. If I can get that from you, Liam. You wanted to give us an update on the construction?
I put that in.
Yep.
Sure. Thank you for that, Chair. So you no doubt see as you go by every day that there's a beehive of activity on the site, and But I'm gonna speak first to the thing that's probably on many people's minds, and that's why isn't there a roof on yet? So you probably wonder that as we've gone through this summer and into this cold winter without a roof on, so. Essentially, just a quick crash course on roofs for buildings like this. There's trusses, and then there's plywood, and then there's a vapor barrier that goes on the plywood. And that vapor barrier went on in August, and it then gets inspected by a third-party qualified professional who's a member of the Roofing Association of BC. And they're very good at what they do and build confidence in us as the owner because they pick out little things that you wouldn't normally think about. And so after that inspection was done, green light was given to advance to the next stage of the roof, which was insulation and then what's called the underlay, which is actually on top of the insulation, but it's underlay for the metal roofing. And that's what you're looking at and have been looking at for the past couple of months, just that big blue roof. And so it's of great concern to us at how long it's taken to then get the metal on top. So we share the concerns that you probably have around that too. And the delay has largely been attributed to issues and around some of the other cladding on the building. So the siding, the metal siding, and the details of ensuring that finishes around openings in the building, like windows and doors, is safe and that there aren't sharp edges and that it's done to perfection. And so that caused the delay to some of the metal cladding, which then caused a delay to the roofing because it's the same subtrade that's doing that work. And we're finally getting to resolution on those details and resolution on the roof itself. And we're hopeful, we're assured that the roof will be going on very soon. And we've had sort of a renewed energy in that direction. And then we're also assured that that same third party will be doing another assessment of the roof prior to the metal going on, and that they will literally look underneath that underlay to ensure that the insulation is dry and that it's not wet. And if it is, it will have to be removed and replaced. And adding to the confidence that we already have in that third party is that they are responsible for the warranty of that roof. And so it's in their best interest to ensure that what goes on is to spec and is to standard. And so it is greatly concerning to us. I hate having to respond to the emails and calls that I get about like why isn't there a roof on that facility? But I do feel confident that when the roof does go on, it will be done properly and that it will be sound and good. So outside of that issue.
One quick question. So the weather may have compromised the insulation?
It's entirely possible.
So who inspects that?
A third party professional from the BC.
That will be in August. That's the inspection. So they'll come and do another inspection
Yes.
before they put the roof on?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And they'll inspect the whole thing?
Yes.
Okay.
We have multiple inspections from multiple trades. So we have concrete inspectors, we have mechanical, electrical, plumbing. There's numerous inspections and inspectors that show up and inspect things.
Worst case scenario, the inspector comes at some point, and what would be the timeline on that? And if he says that it's compromised and it has to be replaced, then how long would that take?
Well, the absolute worst case would be it all comes off.
Yeah.
And then it has to.
Do that in a weekend?
It could be done pretty quick, yeah.
The
Yeah,
underlay and the
underlay and the insulation could come off and go back on in a weekend if they throw enough resources at it, which I imagine they would.
Supply chain problems with that material?
No.
Good.
But more so, any rework is an impact to the schedule. Right. And so we hope that we get the green light. I'll be honest, I won't be surprised if there's some issues with it because it's been exposed for a long time. And so, but I'm ever hopeful.
And the barrier is protected? The barrier that was inspected in August.
Yeah, so you have
Vapor barrier.
The
you have
barrier.
a wooden truss,
Yep.
plywood, vapor barrier,
Yep.
insulation,
Installation.
underlay,
Yeah.
metal roofing.
Right.
So the barrier, which went on, and got the green light, thumbs up, is then covered by the insulation and the underlay, so that barrier is fine.
It is. So
Yeah.
even if the
Even if the
wet-
insulation is soaking wet,
Yeah.
that barrier is fine. That barrier is a vapor barrier, like nothing's going to it. And so the
So
building
the roof,
underneath
the
is
wood
fine.
roof wouldn't be compromised.
No.
The inside.
The inside's fine.
Right.
So it would just be that insulation and that underlay. And I would hate to see that come off. I mean, nobody wants to see that happen, only if it's compromised.
Okay.
And I feel very confident that the inspectors and that the architects really do an excellent job in ensuring that things are done properly. And so I'm not worried about things progressing in a way that it shouldn't be.
Thanks, Liam.
The additional to that though, what's exciting is the inside of the building. And so it's really moving along and we're seeing a lot of progress inside of the mechanical and electrical is nearing completion for its primary installations. Plumbing is getting there. They're working to get the showers all ready in the bathrooms. Each of the individual spaces is really taking shape and form. And when you go into them, you can start to really feel what it's actually going to be like. And we were on site last Friday and it was really exciting because in the large multipurpose room, they were putting up the board, like the insulation or the drywall. And it was really,
It looks like a room.
yeah. And it's
It
a,
looks like a room.
it's a double layer of drywall too for soundproofing and these massive sheets are going up. And so it's pretty exciting to see that happening. And so, and there's initial progress working on the septic system, which isn't as exciting.
I mean, for some of us, it's very exciting.
Yeah.
Not as good, yeah.
So all the different elements are coming into play and we do have an updated schedule from the contractor, which identifies a completion of the end of April. And I'm grateful for that because it's a more realistic schedule because previous schedules were overly ambitious. And so this one is a little more realistic and it is still a bit ambitious. And I still think that there's going to be some further delays, but I think that this is a more realistic schedule that we're now working with.
Great. Thank you, Liam. Excellent report. Action items, quickly from you, Steph.
Okay. Do we share? Okay, so Jillian, consolidate the MOU vision statement with the presentation house document. Say done.
Yep.
Councillor Getty review the cultural master plan and extract relevant sections to support the workshop done.
Yep.
Liam, check in with the chief financial officer regarding volunteer request on rate structure work. I have that as not an action, so that's just, Fraser and Jamie, provide an update on the list of performers who does what on Bowen, that's done.
That's done.
Fraser, thank you. Rate subcommittee, further discuss the approach to hiring technicians, that needs to stay on.
That needs to stay on. That's still
Okay.
being worked on. Yeah.
Steph, share the branding policy and naming policy with the committee. You all remember getting that an hour after the meeting last
Yes, we
time?
did. Yeah,
Do you remember that?
I do.
Okay, good. Tim, flesh out draft document to indicate less the people, but the job, so it sounds more like
That's what we did. Yeah,
Gillian
we
and
did. Jillian and I did that.
you guys did that, okay. Done. Jamie, follow up with the hearth, your meetings are coming after this meeting about the,
Yeah.
okay, the endowment fund ongoing. You sent this, you sent the cost document from the presentation house.
Yep, done that.
And Gail is on the committee.
And Gail is on the committee. That was our
Okay,
last action.
yay.
Yay.
While we're in it, can I just do a quick review of what we are being assigned with today
Sure.
before we do Gail?
Yep.
So the Mission and Core Values Committee is gonna work on the governance section before the next meeting,
Yep.
not just Judy.
Not just Judy,
So-
no, that committee.
And I just want confirmation because there was some confusion with Jamie before on my notes. Judy, Mimi, Jillian, Kim, and Gail. Anybody disputing this?
No,
No, okay. Cool, I'm gonna make this bigger.
many hands, like
All right.
with Robertson Davies in my hand.
I love it. The rates group, your job is to gather information and put it in one document and bring to the next meeting, what are people paying already?
Yeah.
And number of user nights?
Yeah.
Okay, and that's Fraser,
Yeah.
Kristen, Kim, Mimi, and Jamie.
Yep. Although I don't know if Kristen is on that anymore because you said, we had a discussion afterwards whether it was appropriate for Kristen to be involved in the subcommittee, right? Is that right? I just want to make sure. That was me who proposed it, but then it was like, I felt that wasn't my position to tell her what to do.
I thought she was here when they first made, she was sitting at
I
that
know
table.
she was, but I don't know if I was.
Oh, I think it was something along the lines of like,
I can't tell
you can't
staff.
direct
You can't just call, you can't call her up and ask her for something when she was there. No.
yeah,
Somebody's
but,
been asked.
yeah, but I think.
But I
it's
didn't know
okay.
whether so I haven't included her in this discussion.
I think it's all right.
It's already? That was okay, okay. That was just wanted to clarify that.
And you don't want to be part of this one, Lee?
Which one?
The rate structures, I don't think we need Lee in that
Okay.
one. We need him in the management model.
Okay,
That's,
so is that good for that group then? Everyone's
Yeah.
clear?
yeah.
We're all clear on that? Okay. And then the action, I didn't get the rest of your sentence. So the action for the management model subcommittee to continue to work on this
Yeah, we need
operations
to
task
meet
spreadsheet.
and continue discussion on how to put the boxes, how it's gonna work, right?
Okay, so the bottom rows that were into the
Yeah.
relevant sections.
And the costs associated with that. Who's gonna do it? And what kind of labor costs are involved in this?
Labor costs.
Yeah.
Okay, that's it. Nothing to do with like rental rates, right?
No, that's
Okay.
good.
Jillian, Fraser, Kim, Jamie, Gail, and Lee.
Yeah.
Forever hold your peace. Yes, we're good?
Excellent.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Steph.
You don't mind changing the U to an E?
I don't mind.
Thank you.
Sorry.
No problem.
Gail, last on the agenda we have it in is an update from the Performing Arts Committee of the Heart. To let us know what's been happening there.
Well, thank you for making it a line item in our agenda. It makes it easier to introduce, but I had written this anyway, that I just wanted to kind of introduce myself in a certain way because it is really my first meeting, and that I'm replacing Rob as the second member of the Hearth on this JMC. And the rationale from the perspective of the Hearth Board was that as the current and founding chair of the Hearth's Performing Arts Committee, it seemed apropos that I would be that second person. So I thought it would be alongside, obviously, our executive director, Jamie Shepherd. So I thought it would be helpful just to get a little bit of a summary going about what the Performing Arts Committee is and what we've done to date, just to kind of get us all more up to speed, or on the same, in the same conversation. Because we know a lot about the Performing Arts Committee and you probably know very little. So we developed the Performing Arts Committee out of a board meeting that happened on March 16th in 2022. So I realized in going through all of the minutes of this that we're actually 2 years old, not 3. At that time, Judy was actually a member of that original committee. And she didn't take the chair position, I think, in part because she probably in the back of her head knew she was going to be running for council. So it came to me. We then developed terms of reference for that committee back in April 2022. And we began our meetings in May. And I actually have, I brought with me our first call to order, if you know what I mean, like our agenda for that first meeting. And I wrote, these are the issues we want to tackle over the next year. The first one was, what roles do we want to see the hearth play in the planning and then the programming of the performance space? In other words, the use of the large multipurpose room for artistic purposes. The next was, how do we build a vision for a working relationship between the primary stakeholders in the planning and programming of the large multipurpose room, specifically the municipality? And then how does the hearth track the construction phase of this large multipurpose room so that the room's function as a performance space remains viable, right? So, I mean, there's more words than that, but just to give you an idea, like these were the projected images that we had as a committee. And then the next thing that we did was we started to reach out to other members of the arts community that were not on the Hearth board that we thought would be a real asset to the development of the Performing Arts Committee out of the Hearth and in its supportive role to the municipality. And that I really want you to hear quite loud and clear, that for us, we understood that we were playing a supportive role and we're wanting to create a meaningful relationship with the municipality and to understand what the lines of communication were and how we could interact in a beneficial way. So one of the things that we did was we went out and we sought out Kim Seledy. And that was through Cindy Fairbank. She was the one who identified Kim. We brought him into our committee and made our terms of reference allow members on the Performing Arts Committee did not need to be board members of the Hearth. And that was really critical because we knew that one of our strengths was to kind of be drawing more resources, human resources to this project. And I would like to personally state that I am responsible for Kim getting in the application that put him on this joint management committee. It wouldn't have happened had I not called him that morning.
I'm a puppet.
I'm only saying that to say that it's useful to know that in the background, our network, our fingers of connection into the arts community was really critical to the success of having a really solid chair for this joint management committee.
We shall see about that.
Well, yeah, we'll see, but I can't hold you responsible. The next thing that we did is we really advocated through Jillian to form our initial meeting with the municipality. And in August 19th, 2022, we had our first meeting with the municipal staff. We did that from the Hearth side. There was me and Jamie and Rob, Cindy Fairbank, Kim Seledy, Judy Getty, and John Siddle. Those at the time were members of the Performing Arts Committee. And we had a meeting on Zoom because of COVID with Sam Collins, Liam Edwards, and Jillian Drake. Okay, so you guys probably remember that meeting, but at that meeting, one of the things that was very interesting is that we left the meeting with PAC members being tasked by Sam Collins to try and attend to 3 areas of responsibility. He itemized them. 1, that we become AV equipment champions. Those are verbatim what come from my notes. What he meant was to research and create a procurement list to save him that job. The second was an operational programming idea, how we transition into operations when when we move past the building stage and into the operational stage. And 3 was an opening on day 1. Again, verbatim from that meeting, from my notes from the meeting. And so we went ahead and actually tried to tackle all 3 of those things in sequentially. So the first thing that happened is we took on that AV equipment procurement list. On October 28th, I reached out to Harold Leans of Sapphire Sound. I had a long meeting with him, which we then followed up with a meeting with the PAC that Harold attended virtually. And what we had the goal to do was to create an interim technical director position that Harold would fill as an interim position. Because what we understood is that most development projects like this that have a community center with a performing arts community in it, with a performing arts center in it, would have a technical director that was helping to make sure things happened successfully. But you didn't have Lee yet, and there was no one fulfilling that role. So the Hearth actually put a line item in our budget. We went and sought out Harold. He was interested. Harold went and had a meeting with Sam and MC Squared, which was the AV consultant. And he came back to us and he said, you know what? All is good. You don't need me to be the TD. So we said, okay. And we let go of the line item, but I just wanted to be quite clear that we actually moved forward really, really assertively towards helping in that area. I don't know how, I hope it's been helpful, and I believe Sapphire now is on your docket as maybe a collaborating technical.
They're a sub-trade, basically.
Right, that came through that initial contact that I made on October 20th. That's how he approached MC Square. The next thing that we went to task on was the operations idea. How do we seamlessly segue from construction towards operations? The first thing that happened was the new council was elected in October 2022. On February 7th, the new council was briefed by a party of important people to brief. I think it was Jillian, I think it was Jacqueline Massey, and our fundraiser, I'm sorry, Shelley Sandsbury, thank you. And the Hearth was actually not invited to that in the Performing Arts Committee was certainly not invited. So I just showed up, and during the public comments, I got up and I introduced myself and I just said, hello, my name is Gail Lotenberg and I am the chair of the Performing Arts Committee under the Hearth, and we just want you to know that we exist and we're happy to partner and we're here to support. And that was just my attempt at sort of following through with this idea of communications and creating more lines of communication with the municipality. And the next thing that we did was we invited Jillian Drake to attend one of our meetings, which she did, and we're thankful for that, on February 22nd. And it was great to have her, and I have here the agenda of that conversation, but I don't want to go on too long, but it was really helpful. And one of the line items on that was building a vision for operations of the new multi-use facility with special focus on programming for the arts. And we discussed that with Jillian, and it was really helpful. And I was, I'm pointing out all of these things just to help fill in some of the gap in knowledge of how the Hearth has followed through with objectives and initiatives. And then the opening on day one. Well, in May 2023, our PAC committee began a process of starting to plan an opening, in which we had many good ideas, but we had a very kind of cool idea about using a sampler approach to the opening. So what our first season would be, we would get as many artist performance groups to come and do a sampler. And that would be a way of doing a fun opening. You'd have some like on the patio, you'd have some on the stage, you'd have some in a small multi-purpose room, but as a way of introducing the community and getting them really excited about what's going to be happening from the artistic perspective. We generated really cool ideas, but have recently learned that maybe we are not overseeing the opening. Again, that would be okay. But each of those three things that were identified as PAC responsibilities at that initial meeting with the Muni, we have followed through on, and we really want you to know that. For future, we are setting up a fundraiser for this upcoming year. We're hoping to do it in April 2024, approximately. And we are interested in your feedback on our ideas and how we position the fundraiser. But our goal is to put the fundraiser towards the endowment fund. That is a Hearth or Bowen Island Arts Council endowment fund. And we would like to do a fundraiser that would generate more investment in that endowment fund, so that endowment fund could support a Hearth position that would, in some level, attend to some of the open line items. Yeah? So we want to fulfill those objectives. And then in 2025, 2026, which is looking very far ahead, we are trying to make ourselves ready to be looked at by Canadian Heritage as the Hearth being the official programmer of some small aspect of arts performance series in the center. And that's a long forecasted goal, but just so that you know, this is part of our long-term vision. We have a vision, we've been developing the vision for a very long time. And being the JMC is the first opportunity where we really are able to be in regular enough connection where we can communicate these ideas.
Wow, great, thank you. Well done, Gail. There's a lot of information, and I will make it a regular update, which won't be as extensive. Because it won't go through the entire history of the committee. Any quick comments or questions for Gail on that before I propose we adjourn?
Glad you're on board.
Next meeting. No, it's all good?
And PAC is on board.
Right. Excellent, thank you. Next meeting, right? Is that the next thing I have on the agenda?
I'm not making a meeting until the subcommittees meet, and I've heard that you've met.
That's the rule. Okay, so all the subcommittees need to meet and get back to step and say that they've met.
Show me
And
the
then we'll
proof.
set up the next meeting because we'll have something to report.
Can you circulate the membership in the different committees? If I'm gonna
Yeah,
organize
it was in your,
binder.
okay, it's in your agenda, but I will send a new version.
Yes. Good. Can I have, entertain someone called for the adjournment of this meeting? Judy, I don't need a seconder. Thank you very much for your time. We only went 14 minutes over time.
No, adjournment, 6:45.
6:45, yay. Thank you. Thank you, Jillian.
Thank you, Jillian.